I think we've got an exciting year of activities. And before we start today and I introduce the speaker today, let me note a few of the things that we have planned that are coming up. Next week, Tuesday, September the 15th, we have Pakistan's leading political economist, Akbar Zaidi, who's going to talk about the conflicting identities in Pakistan and the impact on Pakistan society, a subject that he's been writing about quite a lot these last few years. On September 17th, 2 days later, we have the Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, who's going to be talking about her country's major foreign policy challenges. Then on October 14th, we have C. Rajamohan, who is probably India's leading strategic thinker and writer, and is going to talk about how to put the Indo-US relationship on a more firm policy basis. That is well-timed because the month after that, in November, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is coming to the United States as the guest of President Barack Obama, and I have a suspicion that Rajamohan's talk is going to be at least focused on an Indian audience as to the kind of policy approach they should adopt when the Prime Minister comes here, so that should be very interesting. Later in the fall, we're going to have a series of talks that are specifically focused on the so-called Afghanistan-Pakistan issue, or some people call it the Pakistan-Afghanistan issue, some variety of that. 4 or 5, including senior policymakers from various parts of both the American administration as well as the Pakistan and Afghan governments. Our South Asia program has had a policy of having its inaugural speech by a senior figure in the State Department dealing with South Asia. And we're particularly fortunate today that our speaker is Ambassador Robert Blake, who is the Assistant Secretary for the South and Central Asian Affairs Bureau in the State Department. Ambassador Blake, I should say before I tell you much else about him, he is a graduate of SAIS. Therefore, we consider him one of us, and he's been a major friend of our program. He also has a bachelor's degree from Harvard, I should say, in addition to his degree from SAIS. Before coming to the United States to assume his present position, he was the U.S. ambassador to Sri Lanka and also the Maldives. And before that, as many of you know, he was the deputy chief of mission at our embassy in New Delhi. Within his responsibility are some of the major challenges facing U.S. foreign policy today. And in his talk today, he's going to review U.S. foreign policy on the several challenges that are rooted in South Asia and impact on the United States. Ambassador Blake? Is this squeaking from this? Does anybody know? Anybody can adjust this? Yeah. Okay. Don't do it on its own.
No doubt some intelligence agency following my tracks. Well, Walter, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And indeed, it's a great pleasure for me to speak here today before this audience here at SAIS. As Walter said, I'm not only a SAIS graduate, I'm a second-generation SAIS graduate. My dad also went to SAIS and was here in 1947. He likes to tease me that SAIS was much more rigorous back in 1947 than it is now, and they were able to accomplish in 1 year what we now take 2 years to do. And I told him that's the delusions of an octogenarian, and I shouldn't pay much attention to him. But I'm very proud of my dad, and certainly very proud of the time that I had here at SAIS, and it's great to be back. Also, nice to see a lot of old friends in the audience, so thank you all for coming. As many of you know, and Walter said, I've maintained contact with SAIS over the years and have been particularly gratified to see the growth in the South Asia program. There are really only 1 or 2 people who were involved in South Asia when I was back too long ago to remember. And now it's really terrific to see the growth, and I really want to commend Walter and his colleagues for all the great work they've done to develop the program. In many ways, the growth of the South Asia program here reflects the growing importance of South Asia in U.S. foreign policy. And I'd like to really focus my remarks today on that theme. The State Department, as many of you know, created a separate Bureau of South Asian Affairs back in 1992. And then in 2005, we added the 5 countries of Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan to the Bureau. And our goal was and remains to support the development of sovereign, stable, democratic nations integrated into the world economy and cooperating not only with one another, but also with the United States and all of our partners to advance regional security and stability in Central Asia. We also wanted to try to revive the ancient trade and cultural connections between South and Central Asia and to help create new links, particularly in the areas of trade, transport, energy, and communications. And also we wanted, of course, to work with the Central Asian countries to stabilize Afghanistan and expand political and economic opportunity in Central Asia. As we continue to develop those partnerships with Central Asia, it's clear that Afghanistan and Pakistan can be a bridge that links South and Central Asia, rather than a barrier that divides them. But much work remains to be done to turn that vision into a reality. President Obama has made clear that he views the international effort in Afghanistan and Pakistan as a single theater of immense strategic importance to security, not only of the United States, but of the world. Afghanistan and Pakistan are 2 distinct countries, but we cannot succeed in either Afghanistan or Pakistan without stability in both. To eliminate the safe havens of extremism and terrorism in both countries, we must use all of the tools available to the international community: military, diplomatic, and development. Our approach for achieving stability must be holistic, addressing both short and long-term challenges through programs in education, agriculture, and reliable energy. In Afghanistan, we seek to empower the Afghan government so that it can address its principal challenges by itself and ensure that extremists no longer pose a threat to the United States and to its neighbors. To do so, the United States and our international partners are training and equipping the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police to help reverse Taliban momentum and go after al-Qaeda. And we are supporting the Afghan government's efforts to enhance security, promote economic development, and provide good governance and rule of law to meet the needs of the Afghan people and the country. To that end, we are working with the Afghan government to build national governance and greatly expand agricultural programs to encourage the growth of other crops besides poppy. In addition, we are implementing a wide-ranging diplomatic effort to strengthen the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan, while engaging in regular consultations with all the major powers who are stakeholders in the conflict to achieve the progress we all believe is possible. Let me say a word about the recent Afghan elections. We are witnessing an electoral process in Afghanistan that is taking place under extraordinarily complex circumstances. It is very important that this process be seen as credible and inclusive. That's why the United States and others believe there needs to be a rigorous vetting of all of the allegations of fraud, and the mechanisms for that kind of vetting are in place. And in coming days, we should see the end of the counting process conducted by the Independent Election Commission. The next stage will then be for the Electoral Complaints Commission to adjudicate those complaints. No one expected these elections to be perfect, and no elections ever are. The key thing is that the outcome needs to set the stage for a productive 3-way partnership between the Afghan people, the Afghan government, and the international community as we work together to stabilize and develop Afghanistan. Turning to Pakistan, it is difficult to imagine a country of such strategic importance and a key ally of the United States that faces a more daunting series of problems. Pakistan seeks to consolidate its transition to democracy while making important progress against the Taliban in the Northwest Frontier Province and tribal areas. Equally important, but less well known, is that Pakistan's economy has been battered by recent financial crises, and most recently and notably, a severe electricity shortage that impacts businesses and people in equal measure. President Obama has requested a significant increase in economic assistance and security assistance to build up Pakistan's counterinsurgency capabilities so that we can help Pakistan to defeat extremism, but also to rebuild its economy and establish strong governing institutions. A stable, constitutional, civilian-led government that provides for the needs of its people by delivering justice, education, healthcare, and economic opportunities will be instrumental in achieving these goals. Let me turn now a little bit to talk about the new partnership between the United States and India. President Obama and Secretary Clinton have repeatedly stated their deep commitment to strengthen our partnership with India. India is expected to pass China in the next 20 to 25 years to become the world's most populous nation. It's a country whose middle class now numbers 300 million people and is expected to double over the next 20 years. To put that figure into context, India's middle class in the next 20 years will more or less equal the entire population of the European Union, whose population during that period actually is going to be declining. Most importantly, India is a country with which the United States shares increasingly convergent values and interests. To capitalize on these many opportunities, Secretary Clinton had a very successful visit to Mumbai and Delhi in July, where she and her counterpart, External Affairs Minister Krishna, launched our new strategic dialogue. As Secretary Clinton said at the time, our relationship was overdue for an upgrade, and her trip served as the first step towards that vision. The relationship will get a further boost when Prime Minister Singh visits Washington on November 24th for what will be the first official state visit by a foreign leader of the Obama presidency. The new U.S.-India strategic dialogue that we have put in place will increase the scope and breadth of our cooperation across 5 key pillars: strategic cooperation, science, technology, health, and innovation, energy and climate change, education and development, and lastly, economics, trade, and agriculture. The 5 pillars in our dialogue encompass virtually all of the key challenges facing the globe today and reflect the vast cooperation that already is taking place at so many levels of our two societies. President Obama neatly captured the scope and breadth of our relations when he said, "Our rapidly growing and deepening friendship with India offers benefits to all the world's citizens as our scientists solve environmental challenges together, our engineers advance our societies, our entrepreneurs generate prosperity, our educators lay the foundation for our future generations, and our governments work together to advance peace, prosperity, and stability around the globe." In addition to launching the new strategic dialogue, a number of important bilateral agreements were reached during the Secretary's visit to India. For example, we reached agreement on end-use monitoring language for military sales contracts, which removes a key hurdle allowing the United States and India to increase our military-to-military cooperation and smoothing the path for increased defense sales. Improved defense ties benefit both of our countries and contribute to our common interests in peace and stability throughout the region. India already holds more military exercises with the United States than with any other country, while U.S. defense exports to India have topped $3.1 billion since 2008. The end-use monitoring agreement should help facilitate the Indian government's increasing shift towards U.S. defense equipment. Civil nuclear cooperation marks another new promising area for U.S. firms. During the Secretary's visit, the Indian government identified two nuclear reactor park sites for the U.S. government for the use of U.S. companies. These reactor parks will create thousands of new jobs in the United States while providing a reliable source of energy for India, where 600 million people still lack access to electricity. We're hopeful that the Indian government and Parliament will take the final steps to approve nuclear liability legislation, publicly announce the reactor sites, and file a declaration of facilities with the IAEA that will open the door for significant new civil nuclear private sector investment in India. Another exciting potential for partnership between our two countries is in space. While Secretary Clinton was in India, the U.S. and India signed a technology safeguards agreement that will open up new opportunities for U.S. firms in the space and satellite sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, one mark of the seismic changes that are taking place in U.S.-India relations is that our bilateral dialogue is less and less about resolving old legacy issues that divided us, such as nonproliferation, and more about seizing new opportunities, both bilateral and multilateral. Bilaterally, the role of our two governments is increasingly to find ways to remove barriers to cooperation between our scientists, our business people, educators, and others. For this reason, we plan to expand greatly the role of the CEO Forum so that our work in many of our bilateral dialogues can be informed by the advice of senior business people on both sides. One of the bilateral sectors with the greatest potential for growth is education. In his new book, Imagining India, The Idea of a Renewed Nation, Infosys founder Nandan Nilekani says, "The new India is united by a respect for achievement, yearning for a better life, and an unprecedented belief that such a life is possible regardless of caste or social and economic status." Nilekani eloquently describes why analysts from Goldman Sachs to McKinsey are so optimistic about India's future. He states that while the working age population of other major economies will be falling, India will have an additional 47 million new workers in 2020, almost equal to the world's shortfall during that period. He estimates that India's so-called demographic dividend will peak in the year 2035, by which time India will have added 270 million people to its working age population. These legions of Indians entering the workforce for the first time represent an immense economic opportunity for India and its partners, but only if they receive the education and training they will need to compete in India's globalizing economy. Right now, the United States is educating over 90,000 Indian students in U.S. schools, and we welcome more students. But America's educational institutions would like to do more joint work in India. The Indian government also seeks greater cooperation. Prime Minister Singh and India's new Minister of Human Resources Development, its Minister of Education, Kapil Sibal, have ambitious plans for educational reform that, if successful, could open significant new opportunities for institutions such as SAIS. In addition to growing bilateral opportunities, another encouraging sign both of the maturing U.S.-India partnership and India's growing global leadership is the scope for more productive cooperation on multilateral issues. Whereas even a few years ago, when such cooperation was almost unimaginable, today the US and India have an increasingly positive dialogue on nonproliferation, climate change, and global trade. With the Copenhagen Conference fast approaching in December, there is perhaps no more pressing global priority than to achieve a global climate change agreement. Just as the Civil Nuclear Initiative helped to address the nuclear elephant in the room, our two countries are hopeful that our new energy and climate change dialogue will allow us to cooperate, not only to achieve an agreement in Copenhagen, but also to lay the basis for sustained cooperation on a clean energy future for both of our countries. The stakes for our countries, but also for the planet, are enormous. India emits 4.1% of the world's greenhouse gases right now, making it roughly the world's 5th largest emitter. As India's economic expansion continues, its greenhouse gas emissions are projected to increase by 50% over the next 20 years. Climate change will have the greatest impact on India's most vulnerable, particularly in the agricultural sector that accounts for more than half of India's workforce, including 300 million subsistence farmers. The goal of our energy and climate change dialogue is to find solutions and work together on clean energy technology to help make India a world leader in sustainable development. The foundation for this partnership is already in place, with the US and India working together to promote more energy-efficient buildings, clean coal technology, and the use of solar, wind, hydro, and other clean energy alternatives to ensure a lower carbon future. Through USAID-assisted clean coal technology projects and practices, Indian coal-fired power plants have reduced carbon emissions by over 90 million tons over the past 8 years. This is just one example of the many strategic and reciprocal partnerships between the two countries that are resulting in high-impact, sustainable interventions that create jobs, expand opportunities, and improve lives. An important part of a successful strategy in Afghanistan and Pakistan will be for India and Pakistan to restore relations to the levels of cooperation they enjoyed between 2004 and 2007. It is useful to recall the progress that was made during that period. Beginning in 2004, then President Musharraf met with then Prime Minister Atul Bihari Vajpayee and pledged that Pakistan would not allow its territory to be used to support terrorism. That pledge provided the basis for the two countries to undertake a series of confidence-building measures through a composite dialogue between their foreign ministries. These measures included agreements to inform each other in advance of ballistic missile tests, to establish hotlines, and establish the Srinagar, Muzaffarabad, and Punch Rawalkot bus services, and the Amritsar Lahore train service. CBM discussions were frozen following the November 26 Mumbai attacks last year. But to their credit, both countries continued political-level talks, the most important of which was a meeting between Prime Minister Singh and Gilani that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh in mid-July of this year. Both countries must now undertake a sequenced series of actions to rebuild confidence and cooperation. Such actions must include progress by Pakistan to prosecute those responsible for the Mumbai attackers, and also concerted efforts to stop militant infiltrations across the Pakistan-Indian border. In response, India has indicated it is prepared to restart confidence-building measures. One significant opportunity would be in the area of trade. Bilateral commerce between India and Pakistan is only slightly more than $2.1 billion worth at this moment. To provide a comparison, trade between China and Indonesia, two countries of roughly comparable size, which in fact do not enjoy the benefit of a common border, is approximately 30 billion, so almost 15 times that of between India and Pakistan. That provides some indication of the immense potential that exists for far greater trade and new jobs and all of the others that would result, all the other opportunities that would result from such trade. When discussing South Asia, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan have a tendency to dominate the conversation. But I'd like to briefly touch on the situations in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, since important changes are underway in each that have attracted a lot of attention. Bangladesh represents an important opportunity. Its vibrant, ready-made garment exports, large-scale export of manpower, and its long-standing commitment to international peacekeeping have already tied it strongly to the international community. Just as important, its return to democratic rule, its willingness to work against violent extremism with us and with other friends, and its solid economic growth all make it a country with whom our relations will grow increasingly close. Indeed, Bangladesh will play a key role as the world addresses some of the biggest challenges of the 21st century, including global warming, food security, and women's empowerment. It is thus fitting that Foreign Minister Deepu Moni, a Johns Hopkins grad, will be coming to the United States next week to discuss the overall bilateral relationship, and will be speaking here, while Prime Minister Hasina and other world leaders will meet the following week in New York. To be sure, Bangladesh continues to face daunting challenges. The political parties have not abandoned the legacy of bitter partisanship. Corruption remains a serious problem, and human rights abuses continue. Still, Bangladesh, despite significant obstacles, has made impressive progress in providing longer, healthier, and more prosperous lives for its 160 million citizens. The United States has an important stake in helping Bangladesh succeed. The seventh most populous country in the world and the fourth largest Muslim population, Bangladesh has a secular tradition and a commitment to democracy. The vision of a relatively prosperous, solidly democratic, and increasingly stable Bangladesh, a vision that appeared as a pipe dream a short while ago, now looks eminently achievable. The U.S. will do what it can to help Bangladesh to realize this vision and transform it into a force for good in the region and more broadly. Nepal is another extremely important friend in the region, which has gone through major changes recently. The United States supports Nepal's transition to a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic nation. To reach that goal, we are focused most immediately on supporting Nepal's ongoing peace process. In 2006, the government of Nepal and the Maoists signed a comprehensive peace accord, formally ending the decade-long Maoist insurgency in that country. The peace process outlined in that accord includes several components, most prominently the integration of the Maoist People's Liberation Army with the Nepal Army and the drafting of a new constitution by April 2010. Despite the passage of 3 years since the signing of the peace accord, Maoist soldiers, along with those disqualified by the United Nations for integration into the Nepal Army, remain in United Nations-monitored cantonments across Nepal. In addition, Nepal's Constituent Assembly has made only limited progress in drafting the new constitution. We would very much like to see Nepal make steady progress in each of these areas. To that end, we continue to support the presence of the United Nations mission in Nepal, and we continue to provide technical support to Nepal's Constituent Assembly in its constitution drafting process. We also provide training to the Nepal Army to encourage its professionalization and respect for human rights and accountability to civilian authorities. In short, we continue in every way that we can to help Nepal realize a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous future. I'd also like to touch on recent events in Sri Lanka, which I'm sure many of you have been following closely. The United States welcomed the cessation of fighting in Sri Lanka in May of this year and the apparent conclusion of the country's long-running conflict. Since then, the United States has encouraged Sri Lanka to heal the wounds of conflict by ensuring that the estimated 300,000 people displaced by the civil war are treated according to international standards and allowed to return to their homes as quickly as possible, and by working towards justice and reconciliation in order to build a democratic, prosperous, tolerant, and united Sri Lanka. With respect to the internally displaced persons still in the camps, the government of Sri Lanka has made some progress easing camp congestion and expanding access by humanitarian organizations. But we're concerned that those remaining in the camps still do not have freedom of movement. We have encouraged the government of Sri Lanka to follow through on its pledge to return the majority of IDPs by the end of the year to their homes. Already this year, the United States has provided $56 million in humanitarian assistance, mostly in the form of food assistance. Other significant programs are aimed at helping the Sri Lankans accelerate the return and facilitate the resettlement of IDPs, such as $6.6 million to international NGOs for demining, and DoD-funded USAID administered projects for vulnerable communities and the reintegration of former combatants. The government of Sri Lanka has made only very modest progress on political reconciliation with Tamils and Muslims. To his credit, President Rajapaksa did meet earlier this week with representatives of the Tamil National Alliance. But in general, there have been few other concrete steps to reunite the country and begin to heal the wounds of a long war in such a way that all Sri Lankans feel they enjoy equal rights and opportunities. We have stressed to our friends in the government of Sri Lanka that to achieve a lasting peace, it must promote justice and political reconciliation for all parties, including by ensuring accountability for past violation of human rights. We're also concerned about threats to press freedom in Sri Lanka, including the recent conviction of Tamil journalist J.S. Tissanayagam on terrorism charges. A successful, united, post-war Sri Lanka is not possible without better and improved freedom of expression. In conclusion, no other country and no other region of the world faces the array of challenges but also opportunities of those in South and Central Asia. I would be remiss if I did not encourage all of the terrific SAIS students who are here today to seriously consider a career at the State Department. I brought with me one of my special assistants, Kate Burnson, who's in the SCA Bureau. She's a recent SAIS graduate. We have many SAIS graduates who are working and having a wonderful time in the State Department. We have people who are working out in provincial reconstruction teams in Afghanistan and in Iraq. We have people who are working on China, on India, and some of the biggest bilateral relationships that we have in the world today. And I can tell you, speaking personally as a Foreign Service officer of 24 years, not a single day of my life has gone by as a Foreign Service officer when I didn't wake up and know that every single day of my life was going to be different. There would be new challenges and new opportunities and new excitement. And I think that's something that has really, I think, made for a wonderful career for me and for so many of my friends. And that's really the opportunity to serve our country and to make a difference in other people's lives. And I think now with the with a new president, with the dynamic leadership of President Obama and also Secretary Clinton, graduates like all of you really have a significant opportunity, not only to serve our country, but also to make that difference. So I really encourage you to take a serious look at a career in the Foreign Service. I'd be glad to come back and talk more about that if there are people who are interested in that, because I think you all certainly would make a great difference to our service. In conclusion, I just want to again thank you, Walter, for inviting me today to speak. I hope this is really the beginning of a conversation with the South Asia program, and I welcome any opportunity to come back to classes or whatever other ideas you might have. So thank you all again very much.
A broadcaster for Personal to the Border Region Service. The region you are talking about, we have 9 hours of original contents to that area. I got a couple of questions. You were talking about the Afghan elections. The questions of legitimacy still looms large on the outcome. So how it's going to affect the U.S. and international community relationship and with the coming government? And also the Pakistan military level has still to develop the trust the U.S. needs in combating terrorism. Are they on board totally? And
sorry, let me take one question at a time because it'll be impossible to remember them all. On the question of the legitimacy of the elections, obviously this is a very, very important issue. There are several important institutions that are now in place that are seeking to verify the results and to address all the significant complaints that were made. And the United States, like every other country, is waiting to hear the results of those before we make any determination about next steps. So we want to see this process play out, and we continue to support the elected government of President Karzai, and we have definitely a long-term commitment to helping to achieve the goals that I laid out in my speech.
Yeah, the second question is, let me put it the other way. Pakistan has its own challenges, and you mentioned some of them. They range from the IDP crisis in the Northwest Frontier Province to its overall economic challenges, and how the U.S. is helping Pakistan. And there are also the question of military commitment. Still there are questions about with partnership with the U.S.
Well, the United States, as I said, is under President Obama's leadership, is committed now to tripling our assistance to Pakistan, particularly on the economic side, so that we have a comprehensive series of actions to address terrorism inside, to help Pakistan address terrorism inside its borders. We've been very encouraged by the progress that Pakistan has made, primarily in the Swat Valley, but also in dealing with militants such as Baitullah Masood. So we think there's been a lot of progress. We've also been encouraged that most of the IDPs that were displaced by the fighting in Swat have now returned, 90% of them. The economy is beginning to come back in that part of the region, and there hasn't been a large-scale return of Taliban to that area. So again, we think that represents important progress. But that's not to understate the important challenges that remain, and I talked about that in my speech. But the one thing I do want to say is that we have a long-term commitment to help the government and the people of Pakistan, and we will honor that commitment.
I think the second hand, I'm going to go in order. I saw the hands and then come over to you. The second one's right back here, and then up here in the front.
Hi, my name is Sulaiman. I'm an Afghan American. My question is that the cross-border activity has been going on between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and you can't secure Afghanistan unless that stops. By saying that, we know that all the drone attacks have been concentrated in Fatah region, but nothing has been done in the control and command center of the Afghan Taliban, which is in Quetta, Pakistan. What has the U.S., does the U.S. have any plans to disrupt their activities in Quetta? What's happening there, their control and command of the Mullah Omar? And also, what about Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who has a safe haven in Pakistan, and people like Haqqani who are constantly attacking U.S. forces in Afghanistan? What is the U.S. policy towards Pakistan? It's clear what the U.S. policy towards Afghanistan is, but what are we doing?
Well, again, in Pakistan, we want to help the Pakistani government to address the many challenges that you face. We agree that there are important pockets that still need to be addressed in places like Quetta. But the first priority right now is to consolidate the gains that have been made in Swat Valley, and also to continue the process in South Waziristan. And again, at a time that the Pakistani judge appropriate, they will take on some of the new challenges that they described.
The next person is here in the front, Rahul, and then we'll go over here.
Ranbir Trehan, retired. You mentioned end-use monitoring agreement with the government of India. is there a precedence for such agreements elsewhere in the region and around the world, and how do we enforce them?
There are indeed precedents. We have these with these very similar agreements with 80 different partners around the world. So the agreement that we have with India is very similar to all of those other agreements. And essentially it provides for, it provides language that will go into letters of offer, letters of acceptance for military contracts, and enables us to ensure that the technology, the high technology that we are sharing and transferring is being used for the purposes in the contracts. And so we have joint verification procedures to do so. And these are what the procedures for those are what are in this agreement. So again, this is not anything particular to India. We have these with our closest allies in the world, and is a sign again of the real potential for high technology defense sales, we think, with India. And I think our companies are very excited about the new opportunities there.
One in the front and then over here.
Ambassador Blake, Aziz Hanifa with India Abroad. Good to see you.
Hi, Aziz.
As you know, the Home Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, is in town,
Yes.
Meeting with very senior officials at the Homeland Security Department, FBI, etc. And one of the priorities of his visit is to bring up the issue of the Mumbai attackers and perpetrators being brought to book. And there is a perception, and a strong perception and a concern, that India cannot resume the composite dialogue unless these perpetrators are brought to book. And there is also a perception that Pakistan has been hedging, and the US, because of strategic interests, is not putting enough pressure, but is sort of wanting this composite dialogue to begin. How do you sort of, what's your take on this perception where India is very insistent that unless these perpetrators are brought to book, this composite dialogue cannot resume?
Well, first of all, let me say that these are really a very complicated set of issues that, in the first instance, are for India and Pakistan to resolve between them. And we have been very encouraged by the significant meetings that have already taken place. I mentioned the summit meeting that took place between the prime ministers at Sharm el-Sheikh in mid-July. There have been a number of other meetings at various levels, the foreign secretary level, the foreign ministry level. There'll be other meetings, I understand, on the margins of the UN General Assembly. And so we hope that the two countries will be able to make progress. And those progress, as you said, the progress that's needed is first to bring the Mumbai suspects that are already in custody to trial and to prosecute them, and then also to stop cross-border infiltration so that there's not another attack such as what happened in Mumbai. And I think that kind of progress will lay the basis for resumption of these confidence-building measures that you talked about. And so I think there is a way forward, and there are some significant positive opportunities here that we hope the two countries can seize on.
Over here. By the way, there is a standing microphone here for those who want to.
My name is Kenney, I write for the Pakistani Spectator. I want to ask you a question about your statement of your long-term commitment, or US long-term commitment. Is that toward Pakistani people, or it's toward some corrupt Pakistani politician or conscienceless intellectual? For example, you know, Zardari is known Mr. 10% universally. And I don't think if he has changed his attitude toward ripping off Pakistan. And our Afghan friend, he just asked a question, very serious question about doing bad deed in Afghanistan through Pakistani army or Pakistani ISI. Probably he was implying that. And you don't need to, you know, learn these things from media. You could look at this. I don't know if you have read Hussain Haqqani's book, Pakistan Between Military and Mosque. He is known as a political prostitute among Pakistani American community. And if you see,
could you ask a question?
According to his book, all dirty work in South Asia, like Nepal, Burma, India, is done by ISI. Still, we support these kind of politicians and these kind of conscienceless people to rule that country who have no conscience, who have no morality, and just they want to gain some money or gain some material benefit from that poor country. So I mean, when the Department of State support these kind of people, US going to have bad reputation among Muslim masses. There is no way you can improve U.S. reputation unless we change our behavior in that country and try to do something for poor people or poor Muslim of those societies rather than the corrupt politician or conscienceless people like Hussein Haqqani. Thanks.
I say
If
next.
that was a statement or a question.
I'm not sure. I think it was a statement. I think the next person here, right. And then.
Hi, my name's Paul Loyce. I'm a student here. And I read in the Financial Times about a week ago that the Doha round might be concluding. Could you speak on the U.S. and the Indian position on that? Or whether or not that's even happening?
I'm surprised that the Financial Times would make a prediction like that. But I think what they're referring to is there has been a recent ministerial where they've been talking about the Doha round. But I'm not, to my knowledge, if there had been any talk about concluding the Doha round. That would certainly be a major breakthrough that would be on the front pages. But I would say that on that, as I said in my speech, we think that there's a new opportunity, but also a new willingness on the part of India to work with the United States on these big multilateral issues like global trade. We think it's significant that India's Trade Minister, Minister Sharma, made one of his first overseas visits to the United States and had a very good meeting with his counterpart, the U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk. So I think the atmospherics have been very good so far, but the challenge now is to translate those atmospherics into sort of concrete measures to bring about a real deal, and I don't think we're there yet. So we hope to build on those positive atmospherics and get some concrete movement. Yes.
We had one way in the back, and the next one was up here, and then two over here. And the very back, the very edge, right in the back.
Hello, I'd like to follow up on Aziz's question. What is the U.S. doing to put pressure on its ally in the war on terror, Pakistan, to bring those behind the Mumbai attacks to book or to justice?
Well, again, this is something that's up to the government of Pakistan to decide when to take these steps, but certainly it's in Pakistan's own interests. As I said earlier, we think that Pakistan has already made important progress in the Swat Valley and in South Waziristan. And most importantly, I think, is that the Pakistani people have supported that progress, and it has won the elected civilian government more support from them, and therefore, I think, suggests that that momentum can be sustained, not against all of the terrorists that are based in Pakistan. And I think that's what we, and that's what the Indians, and that's what the Pakistanis want to see. And so, for the first time in a long time, we have a common interest in that, and so we're all working towards that common goal.
There's a question up here.
My name is Ali Jiwani from American University. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom recently put India on a watch list of countries that they monitor. How is the administration going to react to that? And if that's going to sort of stop the momentum in U.S.-India relations?
I wouldn't say it's going to stop the momentum in U.S.-India relations, but religious freedom is an important issue to the United States. It's also an important issue to the Indian government. I think the Indian government at the center takes a very principled position on the issue of religious freedoms in general. And the problems that we've seen in India have been at the state level. And there have been some quite serious problems in places like Orissa. And we in the United States have responded very quickly to that. We've expressed our concern. We've sent our consuls general to those areas to find out more information about that. And we welcome the dialogue that we have with the Commission here on religious freedom issues. And we think it's very important for governments like India to have their own dialogue with that Commission. And so I'd say it's an important issue, but it's not something that's, we have many, many different equities in our relationship now.
Question up here. No, I think you were next. Right, no, sure.
Mr. Ambassador, how about a relatively non-controversial question? I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm president of J.E. Austin, and we are fans of SAIS and regularly recruit students from here for our projects in Central Asia and South Asia.
We'll be in contact with you, too. So.
my question is really one for students of government and foreign affairs. We know that Richard Holbrooke has been named kind of a czar for Afghanistan and Pakistan. How does your office relate to that? And as Ambassador Haqqani pointed out to me, the Obama administration has organized itself differently for implementation in its foreign affairs program than the Bush administration. And how does that organization differ? And specifically, what do you do and what does Holbrooke do?
That's a good question. Ambassador Holbrooke is the special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, which means that he is the person who is in charge of our policy on Afghanistan and Pakistan. He has day-to-day operational control of the policy. He reports directly to the Secretary and through her to the President. I'm responsible for the other countries of South and Central Asia that are not Afghanistan and Pakistan. But of course, most of the countries in the SCA region, as we say, have some piece of the Afghan-Pakistan puzzle. Most of the Central Asian countries, for example, are participating in what we call the Northern Distribution Network, which is a network that provides for the delivery of non-lethal supplies to our troops in Afghanistan. And we welcome very much the support that we've received from the Central Asian countries. They too have a very important stake in what happens in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Already militants are crossing over from Afghanistan into countries like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So we're working very closely with those countries to help, for example, improve border security, to stop counter-narcotics, to help them interdict narcotics trade and so forth. So I work very closely with Ambassador Holbrooke. He's somebody that I've known for a long time. He's somebody I respect immensely. He's done really a fantastic job of mobilizing all the resources of the U.S. government. He has, in his own quite small office, very senior representatives from most of the U.S. government departments that have a role to play in Afghanistan and Pakistan. For example, the Department of Agriculture, which, as I mentioned, is very active in Afghanistan. So he's done a really splendid job of kind of pulling all this together in a way that someone like me could have never done, because he has the clout and he has the experience to really make these kind of things happen in a fast and effective way. So I really feel like it's an honor to work with him. As you say, we do have some other special envoys, because the President felt that this was the way to kind of get fast action on a lot of these issues that really need very, very high priority attention. And I think Ambassador Holbrooke has delivered, but still we have a long way to go. And I think the results will start to be seen. And so it's a little bit early to start to make judgments about, for example, the strategy in Afghanistan. Because I think, for example, in the agricultural area, I think we'll begin to see some results in the next year on that. We're going to be starting to work with the Afghan government on issues like reintegration of combatants and so forth. So I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, but we're optimistic about the possibility of making progress in this area.
There's a question here in the front, and then to midway.
This is Lalit Jha from Press Trust of India. Yesterday, President Obama issued a presidential determination on sale of military defense equipments and services to Maldives. What do you think there's need for selling defense equipments to Maldives? The tiny nation, do you think it's facing some threat from neighbors or terrorists?
Not so much a threat from neighbors, but Maldives faces a number of different challenges. There's, first of all, there are terrorists that come through the Maldives, that transit through the Maldives. The Maldives has a particular problem in that they are a nation of many, many different small islands. So they face a particular challenge in terms of maintaining the ability to monitor what's going on in their seas. They also sit astride some of the major sea lanes in the world. So it's very, very important that they have the ability to monitor activity. Occasionally, there are terrorists and others who try to make use of Maldivian territory. So we have the Maldives is a very moderate Muslim nation that works very closely with the United States and others. So we have an interest in helping them in small ways to do what we can to help address their challenges. And so the purpose of the statement that the President put out yesterday was really just to provide the legal framework that allows us to provide this modest military assistance. We don't yet have any assistance to announce, but we have the framework now to make that happen.
We have one here, Matt Rudolph. I should say, I know Matt well, who's about to speak. I mean, I've known him since, and he's the most recent addition to this group of South Asianists here in Washington, I think at Georgetown, that you're at, and welcome to us all. So welcome to Washington.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to make this the last question because I've got to run off to it.
Okay.
I'll try and make the question quick. Hi. So it's a question about U.S. policy towards Pakistan and your remarks about the tripling of aid.
Right.
But what I'm curious is what the thinking is in the State Department about policies for the transformation of Pakistan. One of the big problems in U.S. policy towards Pakistan over years, sort of structural, has been a sort of top-down approach. So I think everybody agrees that to break through the sort of iron triangle and begin to transform Pakistan, we need policies that are more bottom-up. Things like providing a market for final goods from Pakistan here in the U.S. Sure, India should do the same, but we have very limited ability to control what India does with its trade policy towards Pakistan. We can affect U.S. trade policy towards Pakistan. So on trade, local governance, support for civil society type organizations. Is there a thinking on that? How does that link, for example, with Kerry Lugar and the White House, the two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue on that? Right.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, I think that perhaps the major change in what the President Obama is trying to achieve is a much greater focus on economic assistance and some of the things that you talked about, governance and helping the Pakistan government to improve governance, but also to improve services to the people, be it education, health services. And so we have a very targeted, very, very much bottom-up approach where we're trying to work in areas where we know the militants are active and try to directly address some of the grievances that give rise to some of the militancy in those regions. And so it's, I think, a very targeted and we hope successful program, but it's something, again, I want to stress, this is a long-term program. This is not something that we're going to see results in overnight. And President Obama has consistently stressed that we have a long-term interest in helping the people of Pakistan, and we intend to honor that interest. But we also understand that there are significant challenges still there, and we want to work with the government and with the people to address those challenges. So again, I'm awfully sorry I've got to run off to another appointment, but I really thank you all for coming, and again, I hope this is the beginning of a conversation, and most of all, thanks to Walter for allowing me this opportunity.